Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Siebert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships.
Welcome to Relationships Inside Out, where today we're going to celebrate our 100th episode.
The big centennial.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. We've talked about so much.
I mean, you and I were just, we both got our doctorates at the same university. We reconnected after, and we talk about this stuff so much. We're like, why don't we just record while we talk?
And see if it helps anyone, even one person.
Here we are, 100 episodes later in over 50 countries?
Over 50 countries. I think 53.
53?
I could be wrong. I haven't checked in a minute, so it could actually be more.
But I mean, that's amazing. And we appreciate all those who have
supported.
Yeah, and listen to us. And we'd love your feedback if you have it at any time. Now that we're 100 episodes in, you have a lot of material to talk shit about what we need to
critique us. We like critiques.
Yeah, I think it'd be important for us just to kind of reflect on the episodes, or at least the general themes. Because if we think about a lot of stuff we've talked about, there's some underlying themes that are very important to our work, and we also in our clinical work, right?
It's crazy to think about that has transversed over a couple of years. And I think back to some of our first episodes and what we've probably even learned since then on those topics.
Nothing.
You would say that. You would. Or what has changed and what hasn't, right? We think of all of these things as evolving all the time. Some things just don't change, like needing compassion and needing boundaries and leaning into vulnerability.
Validating, feeling validated, whether, you're for yourself or from others. Hopefully we're not dependent upon others for the only source of self-worth and validation.
And that's what's been cool about our podcast, or at least we think it's cool, is it's not just about relationship between you and your partner. We've talked about relationships with your kids, with yourself, with your parents, family, friends, community. Relationships are an integral part of all that we do. And yet many of the skills can be applied across any type of relationship, not just one.
Yeah. And significant relationships are a huge predictor of happiness. They're very important, and we don't prioritize them. Hence why we feel like it's so important to talk about this, is because we just take them for granted. We set our alarm clocks to get up from work, but we don't set anything to make sure that we're attending to our relationships, even with ourselves.
We just go through the motions and then wonder why relationships fall apart, why friendships grow apart, why we have this sentence of, I don't know who I am or what I like, because we don't create time.
Or I don't know why I keep finding myself in the same patterns.
But if I asked you what you do for a job, you'd know. You'd know very concretely. But the other pieces, we don't. I think that's at the heart of why we really created this, is we have so much knowledge that we've gained through personal experiences, professional training, clinical training, that we just wanted to share so that people can have healthier and more positive relationships.
Yeah. And then the unfortunate piece is in our culture, because I would argue that relationships aren't valued from a cultural standpoint, to the point that we don't learn a lot about them outside of our family of origin. And those aren't necessarily the best models. And we don't really have any source of information other than through, our families, which then we tend to repeat those patterns, whether we're aware of it or not. And then our own experiences. So we just want to provide a source where others can get different insights and perspective of what healthy relationships could look like. And granted, there's variability in what healthy looks like, even culturally, because we've talked about differences in like patriarchal and people who are, very much like, this is the way we want our relationship. There's nothing wrong with that. Or more, what's the word I'm looking for? Matriarchal or
egalitarian.
Yay.
Picture Greg.
Told you I didn't learn anything. But I mean, so it's really, again, not about that, but it's about how do those dynamics look, and are they healthy? And that's one of the themes that I think underlies a lot of what we talk about, are what are the underlying processes and interactions with others?
How do we preserve the health, the levity, the joy in those relationships? One big thing that stands out for me is boundaries. That comes up in so many of our episodes, and I wish we taught it in schools.
Yeah.
Right. My littles, I'm huge on boundaries. If you have not gathered at this point, my 4-year-old knows how to set boundaries with her body. With me, if I want to give her a kiss and she says, no, thank you, mom. With a doctor, with a stranger. Boundaries start when we're little, and it's not punctuated enough in our culture.
Yeah.
And yet it underlies any healthy relationship, regardless of culture. How those boundaries play out, what they look like, shifts by culture. But having a sense of bodily autonomy, or what I'm willing to tolerate emotionally, what I'm not, what is allowed within my faith, my culture, my race, my identity of whatever type.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to know that and know how to advocate for them well.
And where that's come up in a few episodes is in particular is the boundaries we have with ourselves and how much we're willing others to take advantage of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big one when we talk about the self, and then boundaries with others. I think for you and I, a lot of it's like the in-laws, or people who have significant relationships, the people outside of it, and how they're shaping
the periphery.
The periphery, yeah.
Boundaries of what I'll tolerate from my spouse.
Balance and work-life balance is a boundary.
Mm-hmm. When I have friendships, what kind of behaviors will I tolerate? What won't I tolerate? Boundaries come up in just about everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Whether it is household chores, friendships, sex, it is integrated into all parts of our life.
And communicating those. This is where the other theme that comes up is processes. We're allowed to have the feelings we have, the thoughts we have. That's how we present them is very important. And not just to other people, but how we communicate to ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like if something's wrong, do we berate ourselves? Mm-hmm. Bring ourselves down, or do we give ourselves compassion, right? That's a process. If we're in significant relationships and I want to tell my partner that I'm not necessarily happy with them, how are you presenting that? Oh, you're not a good person. You don't care about me. Or is it, I appreciate everything that you've done. This is really important to me. Like this is, when you do this, it means so much. I really would love more of X, mm-hmm. not because you're doing a bad job or not because something's wrong, but this is just where I'm at. Regardless, right? It's how we present it, how we communicate about it is very, very important of how that's going to be received to ourselves. Because on the example of the self, I mean, that erodes our self-esteem.
100%.
And self-worth if we continue to beat ourselves up and communicate with ourselves in a way that it's unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And same with our partners. Like how are we going to have a healthy relationship if the way I'm delivering what's going on for me is causing my partner to become defensive and when I say cause, I mean, it elicits it, right? They're also responsible on their end too.
But communicating it, that is core. If I wake up grumpy, because we all have those days, if I can look at my husband and say, hey, I'm grumpy today. It's not you, it's me. It helps him to not become defensive. Mm-hmm. It helps me to recognize my responsibility to do something with it. Communicate.
Well, and even using that example, if I were him to communicate, that sucks that you feel grumpy. I hate those days. Like that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that it seems to be more frequent lately. How are things going? Mm-hmm. Because at the same time, there's relationships where the partners like, it's okay to ask for this. And then they just like run with it.
Truth.
Right. So this is what we talked about too, is a balance in this, mm-hmm. is we're allowed to have these things. It's about how we communicate, but there has to be reciprocity.
What you just gave as an example is another core theme of something we've brought up over these 100 episodes, and that's validation. My partner saying, those days are hard. I'm here for you. Mm-hmm. Even how can I support you? So now the compassion piece. Those are also central tenets to any healthy relationship. Can I give grace when grace is due, or hold you accountable when that's also mm-hmm. due? Can I validate your lived experience? Even if I don't agree with you, can I say, man, that sounds really hard. Sorry you're going through it.
Mm-hmm. And that brings up kind of the reciprocity piece that I just mentioned, because a lot of with couples in particular, and even families that I've worked with, it's, well, I'm always the one doing validating. Mm-hmm. So just being aware of the reciprocity. What's a healthy reciprocity for you? Mm-hmm. And here comes boundaries, because if it's not a good reciprocity, then you can put boundaries up mm-hmm. of what that looks like. But reciprocity is important. It's hard to want to be the one that continually validates or continually puts the effort in to make sure that we're going on dates, or we're taking time to connect. Or we're using, like, especially couples that are in therapy and they're learning new skills. They're not putting the skills in. They're not practicing.
They didn't lead the homework, so we didn't do it.
Yeah.
Hear that all the time.
And by reciprocity, I don't mean tit for tat. It's more of balance.
And a desire to give, not just receive.
Yeah.
When we get burnt out, we want to receive because we're tired. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, especially within American culture, are burnt out. And so we're always looking to take or receive.
Shower me with compliments.
But we also have to give in a relationship, even when it's not convenient, even when we don't want to, even when we don't agree with it. We still have to be willing to give.
And this brings up the effort piece, which we've mentioned quite a bit too, is we put the effort in for work. And there's parts of relationships to make it healthy that require effort. And this is this is the prioritization piece, the theme. Because one theme that we talk about quite a bit is prioritizing.
Yeah.
And relationships are a priority. And that includes with ourselves, with our significant others. Why aren't we prioritizing, or what's getting in the way of prioritizing and putting in the hard work?
We have Valentine's Day coming up here.
Ugh.
And I see it as a Hallmark holiday. It's just not my jam.
Yeah.
It does give a cheap excuse, rather not cheap, but a cheap excuse
Depending on who you are.
to prioritize the relationship. How do we make it more than Valentine's Day? How do we create that same sentiment in every other month of the year, not just in February?
Oh, and how do you also make it about yourself too, in the sense of loving someone else, a significant other, but also myself?
Yeah. That's such an important part, right? How I feel about myself directly impacts how I show up for other people.
And that's how reciprocity shows up too.
Yeah.
Is I put all this love out there, but are you also keeping balance with how much you love yourself? Caregiver burnout's a real thing. We've talked about that quite a bit in terms of when we're taking care of others, and how much we can be taken advantage of and be burnt out. And you and I both worked at the same short-term inpatient psychiatry.
Whew.
And I would say the predominant cases were caregiver burnout.
Truth. Or burnout just from general living. We live, at least here in American culture, we live in a high productivity kind of space where we're expected to go all the time. There is no slow down. In fact, if you do slow down, you're seen as lazy or apathetic or selfish. How do you reframe that for yourself? How do you give yourself seasons of rest? We need those seasons. And then I can show up as a better mom, as a better partner, as a better therapist, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, which is encompassed by this umbrella of what you and I care about, is how do we take care of our relationships? How do we take care of ourselves? And they're not independent of one another. We can't necessarily be effective in a relationship if we're not taking care of ourselves, as you mentioned. But also, if we're not taking care of our relationships, we don't necessarily feel good about ourselves either.
No, and then it leads to more conflict. Conflict is something we've talked about quite a bit in here. How to have healthy conflicts, how to listen actively, be curious. If we're really pissed, taking that couples time out we've talked about, where you take a break, a planned break, not just walking away, but saying, hey, love, I need to take a time out for 20 minutes. We'll meet back here in the living room at 12 o'clock or whatever. You have to actually return, but take those timeouts. Don't try to force conflict when either or both of you are escalated. And that's something we've talked about a lot in here, is how to handle disagreement and conflicts well. To include that curiosity piece, that self-regulation piece. I am responsible for me. The partner's not responsible for me being pissed, right? He can't make me angry. He can do shit that I don't like. And then I react and respond, and I'm responsible for that piece.
And kind of what you're capturing too for me is the how. Right? Is I don't look at things as right or wrong with couple. Everyone has their own dynamics. We learn different things, unless there's like abuse and like serious things like that. But the how is really important. And in a couple ways. One is, how is the process by which we either navigate conflict with ourselves or others or communicate, but how are we doing it with ourselves, but also what's effective for the other partner and what's effective for me. And a lot of us don't really venture outside of changing what we're doing. And when we think about a lot of how do we create a healthier interaction with ourselves or others, it's changing that process.
Truth.
It doesn't mean you have to get away from your core values or the root of who you are. It's just delivering it in a way that can be received and understood. And
it's to your benefit to do that.
Yeah, because it's then someone else might be more engaged. They might be able to reciprocate validation, or you might get your needs met more readily, if you will. But the how is really important in that question of, why am I doing it in this way? Where did I learn this? Is it working?
What else could I try? If you don't know the what else could I try, go get help.
Well, and investigating the how also is like, okay, well, this is how my parents talk to each other. Or it could be something like attachment. this attachment, maybe I have a more anxious lens, insecure, anxious attachment, and that's how I paint the world in my relationships. That might need to be worked on. So just being curious about that was a big, I think, theme that we've touched on in several episodes.
And then when you step in it, when you fuck up, because you will, what do? Right? We talked about repair and what effective repair looks like. It doesn't look like, well, if you didn't make me angry, then I wouldn't have. Or I'm sorry, but it's not what it looks like. It looks like taking full ownership of my space. It looks like acknowledging the impact that I had on someone else and acknowledging what I'm going to do different in the future without bringing up what the other person did right away. Doesn't mean you never get to. It just means when you're in the moment of surrendering and apologizing, it's about you. You are center stage. So it is, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I can imagine that was scary and hurtful for you.
Whether you agree with it or not.
Truth. And I'm going to work on having a calmer body in our future discussions. That's what that looks like. Notice I didn't say, yeah, but you need to work on. Nope.
I'm going to work on not giving feedback ever again because you can't take it.
Look, I'm working on not throw punching you right now. So it's the best I got. Best I got. But that's an important part of it too, because we are going to mess up.
Yeah.
We are going to step in it where we don't prioritize our partner, where we don't offer validation, where we say something shitty.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got to fix it.
Yeah.
Sweeping under the rug, despite popular belief, does not work. That will come back to haunt you because you're going to trip on that at some point on your rug.
Yeah, I mean, the avoidance or how you repair, again, this all speaks to processes, right? So repair is a process in itself, but it's also content, conflicts of content, sex, which is something we touched on quite a bit, is content, but how we navigate it is extremely important. Because I think about, especially with sex, if we were to talk about that, because that's been a big one. We've even had guests that talk about that in that realm, who are experts and trained. The thing is how couples even talk about it. So many are uncomfortable. And so we don't get needs met there often.
And nearly universal experience, like death. And we talk about neither of them.
Yep.
And just about everyone experiences them. Death, everyone does experience.
Yeah. And we have plenty of people that tell you how to do things, right? Like, especially like media tells you how to grieve. Other people tell you how to grieve. You have media telling you how to have sex and what it's supposed to look like.
Look at the porn industry.
And very unrealistic, by the way, right? And so our expectations come from there. The thing is that that's not reality. And we go in with those unconscious, they're most often unconscious expectations. But the process by which you talk with your partner and navigate it and explore and show curiosity, that's what's going to get you through those things. It's about how you navigate the content of whatever you're facing. And that goes back to the core of how do we have healthy relationships? It's the communication, and it's the how we're communicating. And it's also the how of the effort that we're putting in to put, and I think you've used this language in other episodes, but it's like the relationship bank. Right? How much are you investing in that bank? Early on in the honeymoon phase, we do that very well.
Lots of deposits.
But later on, we don't invest as much. We take it for granted. Oh, we're busy. We got the kids. But it's all of this stuff. It's the communication. It's the how. It's the prioritization. All of that is coming together to help make a healthy relationship and dynamic.
Yeah. And if you withdraw more than you deposit, you're in the red. That looks like resentment.
Withdraw.
Discount. She's the pleads. Disconnection. You made me think of discounts. That's great.
Sometimes we need to give our partner discounts.
It looks like toxicity in a relationship if we are not depositing actively. It's not like we can just do that at the beginning and it lasts us a lifetime. Nope.
Yep.
And some people tend to only deposit when they're in a good space or feel like it. The best deposits are the ones that come when it's inconvenient, when you don't feel like it, when you're pissed at your partner, right? If I'm angry at my partner and I can lean in and give him a hug or say, Chris, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry I brought up the dishes that way. That was my frustration. I'm sorry. Holy shit, that's a big deposit. That's going to go a long way for my partner.
Yeah.
Give those deposits.
In those deposits, and what actually helps for the other partner might be different.
Truth.
In being aware of that. And, again, this brings up reciprocity. Who's depositing more? And it's again, not for tit for tat, but say, for example, and this is natural and normal that maybe somebody has the capacity to deposit more and they're in a space, and even when they're struggling, they're still able to do it more. That might oscillate. Instead of getting frustrated about it, this is where again, the process of approaching my partner in an effective way to understand what's happening and where they're at and what's going on, and also asserting the need of, I would greatly appreciate more intention on this in our relationship, because I feel like we both could benefit from it.
And something you said there, it's key that it's a season. If you're with a partner where it's just constantly withdrawing from you, you give feedback and things don't pivot, is that relationship healthy? Is it what you need?
Mm-hmm.
We are not advocates for always staying together. Despite popular belief, people think marriage therapists, our sole job is to keep people married. No.
Nope.
Our job is to find what's healthy or help support you in finding what's healthy and doing that.
And we'll never tell you to leave or not. And
it's not our job.
We'll ask important questions, such as if you had a loved one or someone that you cared about so deeply and they were in your relationship and these dynamics, what would you tell them? And having you reflect on it.
If you say, I tell them to get out, well, honey, you just answered your own question.
Yeah.
So we aren't here to advocate for every friendship staying together, every marriage staying together. We're here to advocate for assessing what's healthy, doing the things you need to do to create health, and sometimes severing when it's healthier to do so.
Wait,
or creating space.
Boundaries? Is that what?
I'm sorry, what? What, Greg? I love me some boundaries.
It's called a podcast. Boundaries.
I freaking love boundaries. They are so important. And from a person myself who, growing up, even in college, I was wretched to deal with. I had no boundaries. I grew up thinking boundaries.
Wait, just passed?
Okay, Gregory. I have a special finger for you. It's not a thumbs up. When I started to learn boundaries, not only did I choose healthier people in my space and removed people who were unhealthy, but I felt greater internal peace. I felt joy. I felt a little bit more control over my space. It didn't feel like I was just subject to every emotion, every piece of drama, every conflict that came in my way. I got to choose. They are so powerful.
And you're talking about a theme that I think is very important, is this: how do we get control over how things affect us, even individually? This is a relationship with ourselves. Is how do we get control? And we're talking about boundaries as a form of regulating, right? And we even talk about how to manage the distress, because unfortunately, when we put up healthy boundaries, those who have benefited from them being unhealthy, there's gonna be tension.
They're the ones that balk at them.
There will be intention. You might get conflict, but even how to manage that stress on your own. Because unfortunately, somehow, and maybe this is just my perception, we've gotten into a place where everyone thinks the world should change for them so they're comfortable. The unfortunate piece is now we're relying on an external factor to change so we feel comfortable, but we don't have control over an external factor. There's too many walks of life and different ways of things go. I mean, I think about somebody who maybe might be ultra religious in one realm and another religion kind of challenges their beliefs, so it causes a dissonance. It's not the role of this other religion to change to make you feel more comfortable. You don't have control over that. So what are skills to be able to manage that? I thought we talked about.
And this goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's process over content. Any couple I work with, I said it in our last episode, I'll say it again. It's never about the dishes. And I say that. And I mean it. The dishes are just a symbol for a greater process or issue that's occurring.
Yep.
Get away from content. Sometimes content might matter, maybe, to give context, but it really is about the process. Yeah. What is the space between us? Us as a family, us as a partnership, me and my kids, myself. What is the greater process that's evolving? Am I okay with that process? If not, what am I going to do about it? And how I handle the processes in my life and my relationships directly impacts my kids and how they're going to handle theirs. We know that we model for our kids every day what relationships look like, what love looks like, enjoyment, all the things. If I model for my kids some unhealthy behaviors, whether they're unhealthy or not, they're going to pick them up. Yep. So I have to be really conscious of the processes I create, that I allow in, that I don't allow in, and be willing to take feedback when sometimes our biases or blind spots, we miss the mark.
And grace is a process by which we navigate
100%.
When we're not happy with ourselves. I mean, they talk about finances as one of the top predictors of separation or divorce. And it's like, finances didn't lead to that. How you navigate the finances led to that. And this is where the process over content
how you
matters.
talk about it, how you internalize the idea of money,
Mm-hmm.
how you as a couple make decisions and plan. That's what matters, not the actual
Mm.
dollar bill itself.
The finances might cause stress, right? It might be a factor causing stress in the relationship. How you navigate that stress is going to
Mm-hmm.
be the important piece. Maybe I can't even think in over the last 10 years, there's maybe been a couple couples that actually have talked about finances and had a plan that they've were intentional about. Most of the couples I always ask, so how did you guys decide to come up with this financial model you have and who manages it and how you talk about it? It just fell there.
It's just what we do.
And that often is the case where when it's a conflict, it's because there hasn't been any intention around how to navigate it.
So much of that is that slide versus decide. And that is under so many of these themes.
Yeah.
We slid into this pattern of finances. We slid into this pattern of conflict. We slid into this pattern of sex or parenting or whatever.
Yeah.
Rather than actively and intentionally deciding this is what we're going to do. When we are sliding by inertia all the time, we lose a lot of power and control, which everyone desires. We lose a sense of intention, a sense of curating joy or an experience we want. And we're just subject to whatever shit we've created. Decide, make intentional choices about these things.
Yeah. And above all, everything we're talking about is just be conscious.
100%.
Just
aware.
Be conscious and aware of your relationship, of the dynamics, of the how, of the
How you
prioritization.
feel. Check into your intuition. I cannot preach enough about intuition. We get so used to calibrating what we do based on what the clock says, based on my bank account, what other people say for approval. What about your own intuition? What about your own gut feelings? How do you feel emotionally? Check in there. There's a lot of good feedback to be found there.
As you're talking, I kind of put a couple of our themes together. So the process, but also like this sense of wanting the world to change for us.
Yeah.
And you were talking about parenting, and that happens so much in that realm of
100%.
because this is how I parent. This is the process by which I parent works. This is how everybody else should do it. And I'm comfortable and feel validated when people do it my way. But when people are parenting or engaged in a process that does not align with me, I don't feel comfortable.
And so I judge them.
So I judge them or I get mad or I let my dissonance dictate how I'm going to respond or react. I mean, and you see this a lot of people's discomfort with things that are different, control a lot of stuff. And even people in power, they dictate policies based on their comfort level.
Truth.
I mean, so this is a human factor. And then speaking of human factor, you talked about we only put into the bank when things are going well. And I'm like, oh, for people who have relationships with higher power, that typically is also true there, right? Is when things are bad, this is, or like we only go at certain times.
We only pray when we need something.
Yeah.
We don't pray with gratitude. The hope is you're praying with gratitude, right? The hope is that we are acknowledging our partner with gratitude, not just when we're pissed off at them. The hope is I'm praising my children when they do things right, not just criticize them when they screw up.
This is where complacency comes in. When things are going good, I don't want to touch it.
Or I don't have the energy. I don't give a shit if I mention anything because I'm only going to mention something when it's uncomfortable, when it bothers me. Shift that in yourself. If you're that person, which we've all been that person, try to pay attention today on what are the good things. What did you enjoy about your day? What did you appreciate about someone? Say it. Say it aloud. What did you appreciate about yourself? What is something you learned about yourself, learned out in the world? Name it.
So us talking about and reflecting back on the last 100 episodes, we're learning a theme that relationships are a clusterfuck and they're very complex. I mean, there's a lot of aspects we've talked about. I mean, there are themes, but there's so many different things within there.
The nuances
that we touched on in regards to, again, how to make them healthier, how to just be aware, what to be aware about. I mean, it is very complex and it's very cluster, hence our conversation.
We just wanted to highlight some of these really important things. And anything we've mentioned here, we've done an episode on. Look back at some of those past episodes. Maybe you skipped an episode or didn't see one because it didn't apply to you. Maybe now it does. We have episodes on divorce, on postpartum, on some of these life transitions. Oh, yeah.
Ending or mending relationships, sex, finances.
And some of these we're going to revisit again.
Yeah.
Like sex. We haven't revisited that in a while.
Neurofeedback.
Yeah. And we'll revisit those. There are other topics that we haven't covered that you're sitting there saying like, man, I wish I had some guidance on this. email us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We love feedback on, hey, this is something I'm going through in life. Could you talk about this? Or this is something my friend went through. What you think? We are happy to cover.
Yeah, and if we have general knowledge about it and we think that bringing in an expert who specializes in that area, like we'll do that. Like we'll bring in something to kind of speak to that.
I have just appreciated this platform. I've appreciated everyone who's tuned in, who's shared it. Appreciate you, Greg. I've learned right alongside.
Yeah.
Just as much as we've given.
With some of our guests, some of the stuff that
I've learned so much.
The suicide one was a big one for me. And
huge.
You know, just the normalization of like where's somebody at on a scale. Like, you know, a lot of people are so scared that when someone says they're suicide, it's like, well, if they're normal, it's like a 7. That's their baseline. Right. But if they go to 8, then we start, you know, like 7 is okay because that's where they're at. They know how to handle it. That's what they're at. I mean, just there's so much knowledge within these specific areas of relationship health with ourselves or with others that are fascinating. And even if no one's listening, I love the sound of my own voice enough that I'll keep doing this.
Later, we're going to cover narcissism.
Wait, did we cover? Yeah, we did.
We're still going to talk. We're going to revisit some old topics. We're going to talk about nuanced families like military families.
Absolutely.
We've got so many fun topics coming up, and we're just grateful that you all listen and tune in, and we are grateful for any feedback you can give.
And one that we have coming up that I'm excited about, especially because Valentine's Day is coming up, is this idea of why do we go on dates and hang out but don't feel connected?
Yeah. We went to dinner, but I don't feel anything.
So we're going to be talking about that here in a couple episodes, which I'm excited about. And then military families, especially with me being a combat veteran, that one's going to be exciting for me in terms of the processes. Because even though there's processes and all of this stuff, there's also little contents in there that inform them in potentially different ways and how we think about them. In an episode that has just come out is about meaning making, and the content does shift perceptions. It shapes perceptions, and perceptions are important by how which we approach and navigate these things. So
I just can't believe we're already at 100 episodes, Greg. It's flown by.
100 episodes of complete shit. It's something.
We are grateful to everyone. And as always, if anyone has topic suggestions, feedback, even critical feedback, we are eager to learn, eager to grow. Please email us at relationshipsinsideout@gmail.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.